Are you all set?
There you go.
Yep.
Good evening all and Happy New Year. Welcome to the January 2nd meeting of the Community Preservation Committee. This is the continuation of our open hearing that was started last meeting, December 5. This meeting is also being conducted via Zoom. To participate in the public comment portion of the meeting, you may click the URL online. You can also go to the live stream on YouTube. And that's the best way I can tell you right now. So, welcome all. Good to see you guys. So let's see. First item is minutes from number 5. Any comments or edits? Hearing none, anyone want a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Doug? All in favor?
Aye.
That was easy. Okay, before proceeding to the further discussion of the applications, just to give us the big picture, I did produce a spreadsheet like last year. We handed it out to you all where we're showing our available resources this year. And for the public, I'll just give it a brief review. We expect new CPA revenues for FY26 of $840,000. We have existing reserves in the Affordable Housing Reserve account of $279,863. And we have existing reserves in the unreserved account of $590,967. So it gives us an overall total of $1.710 to spend. And so to me, it looks like we have the resources to consider all the applications. We're not financially constrained. We still have some reserves. So we'll use that as a guide as we go forward. And the first two things, however, I did fill in that we typically do. We know that we have to present the next payment of the White Cliffs bond. And this year it will be $166,575. And we always assume that we will recommend that comes from new revenue. And for the administrative fund, we're allowed up to 5% of new revenue. And we typically ask for that. So that would be $42,000 for this year. Still leaves us $631 in new revenue, plus the other reserves mentioned. So we're in good shape. Moving along then, the first project on the agenda is the Conservation Fund presented by the Open Space Committee for adding $200,000 from CPA money into the Conservation Fund to build back up reserves. As we presented before, it's been a very successful program, acquiring many open space properties, and including, it was the main mechanism, or one of the main mechanisms for helping acquire the Whitney's Peak property at last town meeting. So, Open Space Committee believes that was a reasonable request. And as we mentioned, we do still hope, right, to get the reimbursement from DCR, which would also add more to the conservation. Are there any questions regarding that application?
I do. John? As I mentioned at the last meeting, I'm suggesting that we perhaps consider increasing that amount. Given the fact that we are, for lack of a better word, flush this year. So I'd like to entertain conversation about increasing that.
Sure. Did you have a recommendation?
I didn't. I wonder if we should push this to the last item and see where we are after we go through the others. Maybe save this one for last. Is that appropriate?
I think that's fine. I don't expect we'll make all final decisions tonight anyway, but I'm certainly never going to be opposed to that. And if we truly believe that we have the extra resources, then I think we could do it. And I think as we usually do, we'll balance out how much we feel like we should always leave in unreserved funds. So
I was not clear, so I want to be clear. We're not voting on anything tonight, right?
we may be. You're entitled to make a motion, but
Usually we do it in one night. Is tonight the night or is tonight not the night?
I expected that February meeting.
Okay.
So, okay. You're welcome. Glad you.
If we're just throwing things around, then I will propose that we increase it to 500,000.
Okay, we'll make a note. Any other comments on that?
I mean, I tend to prefer conservation-y things generally, right? I also don't like putting things into buckets that can't be moved around for other reasons later. So, and that sort of, by putting it in the conservation fund, it absolutely takes it off the table for anything else.
And we all know that the White Cliff possible cash bomb is coming at some point, so it's not a bad thing to have unreserved funds unaccounted for, you know. It's there. Can't pretend it's not. And there's not a specific conservation, opportunity that's really urgent in this particular. Not great.
Yeah, all true. So as I mentioned, probably best to look at it in the bigger picture when we start approving what we consider to be the highest priorities,
Yep.
the higher dollar number. So, good enough, Leslie? Well, your recommendation is noted.
Yep, well, that's great.
Let's see where we stand.
Yep, just wanted to stimulate the
Accounts
thought.
and
That's right.
sort of balance out savings versus conservation fund.
Yep, I just wanted to get the conversation going, so that's great. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, we move on. Good. So speaking of big ticket items, the next line in the agenda is the affordable housing project, and was presented very well by you guys last meeting. Did you have any new information to bring?
The only update, when I had mentioned at the previous meeting, the numbers on the amount of veterans. Some of this is probably changed due to the definition change that I mentioned, the HERO Act. So at the previous meeting, in the vicinity of like Worcester County, there's 236 at the last meeting. Vets that were on the list. Now it's up to 245. Local vets is up to 70 from 62. And Northborough only, these are long-term Northborough residents, it's up to 18 from 12. Some of that's due to the definition change that recalculates the veterans. The state is only through 3 letters of the alphabet as far as redetermining the veteran status. So they still have 23 more letters to go. You know, they just started the program on the first of the year, so today's the first day they're doing this. It went up 6 for Northborough folks just by that change of definition on 3 letters of the alphabet.
What was the total for the area again?
Total for the area is up to 245.
So in other words, you expect no vacant units.
Right, yeah. Well, this is only veterans. And by the way, their time on the list ranges from 1.36 years to 5.63 years.
Wow.
Our overall list, and Andy gets this at every board meeting, our overall list is up to 19,614 for an authority that has 155 units.
Great.
So the time on that wait list is incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of the children, we have a lot of people that we dealt with just today. And the average time that they spent on that wait list is 5 years of the guy that came in today. I mean, it's sad. There's a lot of people in need. That's the only new information.
Thanks for bringing that to light. It only highlights how much every little bit helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
Yes, sure.
I just wanted to say that I'm strongly in favor of this move, of this application. I know that they've run into some road bumps, let's hope only road bumps and not dams or destruction of in potential other down on Boundary Street. And so I think that highlights the urgency of getting this particular deal done, because it's doesn't have the headwind that the other project has. I gotta say, when I heard traffic thrown out as an issue, so yes, I just want to say I'm very strongly in favor of it.
So noted. I think I can speak for all of us to say it's very worthy, and glad to see it come back to fruition after being disappointed a few years ago. But speaking to that, I wanted to ask if you were confident in the budget you've presented. Because if you had any need to change or adjust, now would be the time.
To my knowledge, I checked with the people that proposed it. At this time, they don't see anything. Will any potential tariffs being added to where supplies may come from? Will any supply chain issues, should there be a bird flu pandemic or something, you can't really speak to those changes because it hasn't happened yet, but is it possible some costs would increase? Definitely. But like the moment the state gives us any type of indication that the funding is in the pipeline, we would automatically order. There's certain things in construction, you guys have probably seen it, you definitely can see with the fire station for like some of the HVAC systems, as well as depending on what you're using for electrical power to the building. And a lot of the split units that a lot of places are using because they're more environmentally friendly, a lot of those have quite a backlog. So as soon as we get any kind of a green light, we would automatically order all of that type of equipment. Because, you try to get it in the pipeline as soon as possible to be able to have those, not have a building waiting on one component to complete it.
I have a question. How do they determine who's eligible? Does the state do that? Or is it a straight lottery? Well, it has to include people outside of Northborough initially.
Well, we use the CHAMP system. It's the Commonwealth Housing list. And on that, people have to present as much information as they can possibly. That's how they get ranked. And then when they get somewhere near the top of the list, then they're asked to upload additional information. So that might, the only thing that usually changes is maybe their economic situation. There's a lot of people that will get on, say, the senior list when they're 59, knowing that it might take them 5 years to get near the top of the list. So their economic situation, when they apply at 59, they may still be working and earning a high income, but when they retire, their income is going to go down to Social Security, it's going to be much slower. So now they qualify. So,
Is it weighted toward residents or no?
Oh, yeah. The top possible qualification is to be a local vet. After that, it's local. And then anything beyond that is, the only thing that can beat out any situation like that is someone that's actively homeless, that they qualify as an emergency. And as well as displacement, but the displacement is nationwide, so the folks that lost their homes in North Carolina or Florida due to the flooding and storm, they would have a FEMA letter, which puts them at the top. The only thing that beats that out would be a local house were to burn down. They would be number one. And, so it's a strange system. It's very convoluted.
In theory, all 8 could be not for residents.
Yeah, that would be the goal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times with a new building is one of the things we would ask for, is we would ask to start a new list. So it wouldn't go by this traditional list. Like when Worcester rebuilt a bunch of buildings, when they take it down and then you rehab it or you put a brand new building online, sometimes that particular building will have its own list, which allows you to try to front load a lot of local people, especially people that may have been on the list. We would target all these folks that have been on the list for over 5 years. And as Andy had pointed out in the previous meeting, the first floor of this building is going to be all handicap accessible. So obviously those units would go to people that have some type of handicap.
You guys think we should build a contingency into the request, 10 or 12%? For all the unknowns that you just mentioned that we don't know about yet?
That would be fantastic.
I'm assuming part of it is a housing authority contribution. I'm assuming it's the max you could offer today. Sure.
Yes.
So I don't know, I'm a little worried personally,
Yeah.
knowing the late rejection that you got from the state, and the estimates were way off. This program seems to be much better developed, and I'm assuming you had excellent support from the other contributors. But having said all that, I hate to have you be caught short, and excess money is always going to go back into our funds. So
A contingency would be more than welcome. It would also show a very good faith effort to the state that contingency was built in. Something to consider too is, if we don't use it for this building, let's say this project goes off right on budget, on time, and we could consider using that money towards the development of the 8 units on Whitney Street when that comes to fruition. Because I know in that plan, there was a conversation about 8 units.
sure,
There.
or for that matter, the next project, right? Comments from the members, pros and cons on my idea?
I think it makes sense in this time.
It makes sense to have a contingency there, especially given what happened last time with the funding challenges, and we could see some, as Ron mentioned, some impacts again, depending on the economy moving forward.
I agree with Ron's comment about the message we send to you, HLC, about the commitment of the town towards the project, especially because the ongoing commitment of the town for affordable housing projects has not been the best. More part should be turned down than approved. It sends the wrong message to the State Department of Housing, but this would send a very positive message to the State Department of Housing. So just from that standpoint alone, I think that would help make the case to encourage the state to kick in their part.
What do you think? We make a note to take that into our accounts when we get to that one.
What do you think, 10%?
It's an easy number. Gets you to 880. Could just as easily be 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. 100,000. We've shown there's been no problem in other projects, the money coming back into our reserves, so it's not. It's all pretty well managed. Is the housing authority the builder, owner of the property, so to speak? I'm just
Yeah,
curious how that works in this case.
It's currently being built on our existing campus.
Still considered a municipal body though, as far as when you did the work out and so on. Is that treated differently with this kind
To my knowledge, it's treated the same on, is that correct?
Yeah, the advantage of, well, not advantage, but the difference with using modular, it comes basically as an erector set. But it still falls under the prevailing wage as far as the assemblage of the stack. You know, this only being 8 units, it would only be 2 steps. And then they come in, they develop the hallway. Building comes with the space for the hallway, they have to come in and build the stairs. Things like that.
I would imagine that technique, that prefab type unit is often used by municipalities for space and temporary spaces and things like that. You would think it would be in
It's still fairly new, but like I've done, previously I worked at Somerville Housing, we did, let's see, we did 2 units that were 100 units each. We did another one that was 85 units. We're currently doing one that's 550.
cool.
You know, so, it's worked very well for us. It also kind of controls the budget because the cost is fixed, you know. You do have a little fluctuation on the assemblage, and the stuff that I mentioned at the beginning about the certain components taking longer is something I've learned from doing this, that you need to order those immediately because it delayed one of the buildings coming online for quite a while. But that building was the first LEED certified building in the state, you know, and we got a higher rating than Biogen. And you like to throw that at them. Yeah.
Well, I'm impressed that you thought a lot of that through.
I just have a question on the site. How do you get a crane to assemble? It seems pretty restrictive with it.
Well,
Is there room
you'd be
to-
surprised if you come tomorrow, we have a crane that'll be in the lot tomorrow, taking down some trees over the buildings. You know,
Yeah.
so, you know, you can
Yeah.
make do with it. The part of the area would come in to our parking lot. The other, no, I can't see them needing to go in through the library lot at all. There's a possibility to get some of the construction equipment in there. We may have to temporarily take down the wall that is between us and the library to get some of the equipment in there.
Seems like a more logical staging area.
Yeah, to come in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a good gap between the 2 buildings that are right there. If you look, I don't know if you have the presentation that I brought the last time, there's a pretty good gap between the 2 buildings that are on that side. And, you know, more than enough to get a crane. I'm just showing a picture. Okay.
So does this pricing include everything like plumbing, electrical, all that stuff, or is that?
All that's built into the building. The price does include, I want to say 246, but.
Water hookup, all that stuff?
Yeah, we have 290,520. For the soft cost for the initial, because they would come in, lay the foundation. All of our buildings are on slabs. They would come in, lay the foundation. That includes gas hookups, water hookups. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, if the town says they would like to do the water and sewer hookups for us for free, we would love that, you know. The only town that's done that I know of is Cambridge. But, you know, Cambridge is, their surplus is, the envy of every town.
Very different, yeah.
Any other questions for Ron? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving on, let's talk about the new Revolutionary War monument. Thanks for joining us, Bob.
Thank you.
And I sent you an email today. Got from DPW, helped find a particular site.
Right, that's the only
Reference
thing,
and the
that's the only thing you had.
these pictures here with spot that to me, so this is at the Main Street front of the current Memorial Spire. And
That was recommended by both Scott and Ally Lane. Of the rec department. And since the last meeting, that's pretty much it. We still have a relatively firm quote. We do expect that there's going to be an increase next year, but I put in a contingency which should cover it.
Pardon me, told me last time. How tall are we expecting this to be?
It's 5 feet tall by 3 feet wide by 1 foot. Right, 5 feet?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically the same design as the Veterans Monument at Howard Street.
Would have known that, I read my attachment. Forgive you. Looks like a great spot to me. I think it's excellent to have them in that same area.
Yeah, it'll be good, especially during the Memorial Day celebrations that we have, and when we do our other celebrations for the July 4th, 1776 celebration.
Now, you've done a few things like this before. One, if this were approved, who manages the execution of purchase and so on? The DPW or is it yourself?
It's DPW, and they handle it with
Jason.
I mean, the historical commission would handle approving the funding and paying and going through our finance system that way, but the installation will be supervised by DPW.
Do you think before you commit to the, these kinds of things, you sign off, final dimensions and look and so on?
Yeah.
Do you think they would provide you a mock-up model, if you will, of how it's going to look in that spot? Or even a photographic imagery simulation, things like that that the town might like to see?
I think we could request that. We sent them the design. They came back and they said we could do that. And they said, but,
For instance, if I was buying this and I knew that's where I was going to put it, I'd want to show them the site, and hopefully the person on the other side has a creative influence and they take a look. Okay.
right. Well, I do intend to because I haven't met with them face to face yet. So I wouldn't, once approved, I would meet with them, show them the site, get them actually to come out to the site, review it, and then go through some of those details.
Great.
I explained to them that basically it had to go through funding approval before, and that they wouldn't hear from us until the spring.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah, could be
Well, after that.
third Monday of April. First,
It's a Monday after that time, so last
28th.
Yeah, it's fourth Monday.
Well, I agree, make sure you work on the project. Any questions for Bob? I guess you've made it easy for us, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we get to the fun stuff. Let's talk about those questions. Laura, you wanted to highlight some new information?
Yes, I have a couple of updates. First of all, I did go before the select board at their last meeting. We started the conversation about Whitecliffs. It was very late in the evening, so they decided to continue the discussion at the next meeting, which is scheduled for a week from Monday. So hopefully I did at that meeting, say that you folks are looking for some sort of response for our meeting in February. So hopefully I'll have something for you then. This afternoon, I received an update from DBVW. You folks had asked me to ask them to update the demolition cost estimate. So in 2020, that cost estimate was $454,400. So because of the crazy inflation, she thinks it would be appropriate to update that amount by 35%, which would bring it to $613,440. She says with the caveat that that is a very, very rough back of the envelope estimate. They really can't put together anything to really hang your hat on until they do the project that I am requesting funding for from you folks. Also, there's a letter where I am asking for an additional $6,770. You may have noticed in the DBVW estimate that they had said that their estimate did not include anything to do with hazardous materials. We know from their assessment report that there are hazardous materials located in those additions. So Scott Charpentier helped me go out to a vendor that's already done some assessment work at the property. They are a licensed site professional, which is what is required to oversee this type of work. And they gave me a proposal for $5,885. I am asking for a 15% contingency above and beyond that. So the total would be $6,770. Added to the original budget of $87,170. So that brings us to $93,940. So that that work that they would do would be specific to the addition. So it would not be for the entire mansion itself, just to deal with the hazardous materials in the additions.
Words, where it's the pull from capital environmental is an assessment,
Correct.
not all the work to remove any hazards, just the assessment.
Correct. So like the original project that I'm asking for funding is to prepare the construction documents.
Of course.
So this is also to do the same thing.
And after we have that, we're expecting, what was it, $800,000 demolition?
So the rough estimate, so that does not include hazardous material mitigation. The rough estimate that DPW gave me today was $613,440.
That's to demo with the additions.
And button up the building in a temporary way
Okay,
using plywood and whatever.
and then added to that, we would have whatever the assessed cost would be for the hazardous remediation.
Right, so I had emailed to you all the report that had been prepared by Capital Environmental. So this was based on some preliminary assessment work. This is for the entire mansion.
Okay.
So I don't have an estimate of mitigation just for the additions, like for example, the underground storage tank. Well, that's not related to the additions, so that wouldn't be included. So,
Let me ask the question. I was about to ask, didn't we already have some assessment done by Capital Environment? Because I had
Yes.
forgotten.
so they had done an assessment of all environmental concerns within the entirety of the mansion. So they had noted the, like the woodwork in the historic portion of the mansion and like the carpeting and the ceilings needed to be cleaned. So that would not be done as part of this project. So this project would just be environmental remediation of the hazards so that the additions could be safely demolished.
Which needs to be a separate or updated.
So they,
Is that the point?
so they would work with the vendor. So of course, we got the quote from DPW, it may be them, it may be somebody else. So they would work with that vendor to come up with specifications from an environmental hazard perspective. So it could be one vendor who's doing everything. They may have an LFP on site, and they may submit a quote. So it's one company doing all of this work together. But I wanted to give you folks a quote for potential costs.
So just Lori, to be clear, in that assessment, was there an assessment of the additions?
There was.
There was.
Yeah.
So what we're paying for here is assessment, removal and remediation.
So this report was based on the entirety of the mansion. So it didn't break out
separate.
the additions versus the historic mansion. And so if you look through, they've got like a lump sum cost. Like for example,
Okay,
selective demolition. They have when you're dealing with asbestos, so they have mold, $339,000. Well, if the dance floor is going to be demolished, then you're not worried about cleaning up mold.
okay,
So it's from a different perspective
yeah, again,
than what this work would
got
do.
it, okay. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't being duplicated for no reason.
That's kind of where I was coming from.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
So be it.
Yeah.
Do you think you could make an effort to revise the original application in a way that your budget area reflects the total? Just reading it now, for instance, you have your application references an attachment from DPW, and you can reference an attachment from Capital Environmental. And for the record, I'd like to see all as one.
Sure.
Because the overall effort, again, we're just talking about the assessment and planning for the overall effort, but the overall effort itself is eligible for CPA. It's because you're providing a major capital refurbishment to preserve the historic property. So that, having dug into it a little bit recently, at least there's a justification for the effort as a whole.
Laurie, would it be fair to assume that the 2020 estimate of 454 took into account the likelihood that there were hazardous materials within that would have to be dealt with during the demo? You would think it did, but I don't want to make that assumption unless you think it's accurate.
Well, I know that, so if you read the assessment report, they mention that there's hazardous materials in those additions and it have to be overseen by an LSP. But I don't think that they included within that cost estimate, the cost of dealing with, because I don't think that there was an LSP on the team. So the LSP is the expert who would come up with the scope of work and really be able to assess what the issues are. So, and even in this report, you know, they're making some assumptions based on some assessment activities that they had done. But you'll notice in their scope of work, one of the line items is to collect additional samples that are specific to the additions.
So, to the committee, if you'll indulge me for a minute, I want your feedback on this. Just to see if there's consensus or people have different points of view. When White Cliffs project came before us, late in the game in 2016, 2017. Anyway, the committee made a decision to bring it to town meeting. Many of you were on the committee that day. Except maybe Andy.
Yeah, it was not.
Jeff.
No.
Not you either. Still in the yard.
I was.
Anyway, we made that decision. We made a presentation. Yours truly. The town voted for it by a strong majority. And the proposition, the proposal was demolish it or save it. The town voted to save it. I think we were very clear that there was not a full plan. We had no time to make a full plan. We just needed to act to save it or not. Town voted to save it. There was an implied responsibility that the town would follow through on plans to restore it and make use of it. It's a fool's errand to go back in hindsight and try to blame time or COVID or different people or committees for what hasn't yet taken place. Legitimate efforts were taken. Money was spent on excellent engineering analysis. Full report and presentation was given. Committee was formed. They did diligent work. They put out an RFP. Proposals came in. An excellent proposal was chosen. And our town chose to move on from it. So you just have to keep going forward. But in the beginning, in the baseline, I always assumed if we're going to buy this building, CPA funding is going to have to be a major contributor to the restoration of White Cliffs. It may not account for everything, but we were buying an historic property. It's a main tier of CPA. It all fit with the model of what CPA is supposed to do. And I personally assumed we were going to be called upon to review yearly, maybe, different projects to do steps as we went along to restoring the building. So having said that, from time to time, there are some who have given some backlash maybe, or questioned whether this committee was behind the effort to maintain and restore white groups. And I just think that's always been false. But we can't set policy or set the town's direction. We still have to wait to receive proposals. It doesn't mean we can't be proactive. And that's kind of what my point is. This is right now an inflection point that I feel like we need to be proactive. And what I was trying to get at the last meeting was, I was obviously frustrated, and Lori's asking for a project for another engineering analysis, and it has been spoken about as, well, obviously it's phase one, because then we're going to get the real cost for what it is. But we're not presenting it as such, and I think if we don't present it as such at town meeting, at least a plan that we're going to do this, which is get rid of the additions to make the building more secure for the ultimate restoration. That's what I believe we need to be presenting at town meeting. And if we're going to present that, that's kind of why I asked you to get at least a baseline estimate. And I feel like part of me would like to say we should be going to town meeting and asking for a much larger pot of money. If it's going to cost at least 600 some thousand, it's probably low, and we're going to need 93,000 for the assessment. You know, we're up into the 700,000s. In the past, way in the past, we had a few CPA projects where we went on an estimate, approved it at town meeting, and had some difficulty later on because we didn't have good costs. So along the way, we were kind of counseled to say, you need to do some of these things in two phases. And we have successfully done that with, Town Common and some others. And that's fine, but at least we had a plan in those cases. This is what we're going to do. And it's going to be, first it's the cost, then it's the actual project. So that's kind of what I'm getting. And I want to know if I'm on the right track here. That this committee would always be supporting what they want to do. If the town, the real decision, I listened to the select board meeting, by the way, after the fact. I wasn't able to see it at that time. And I was just struck by the continued indecision. It's no disrespect to any individual, but it's clearly still up in the air. So, to me, the town needs to decide, really, first of all, A or B. Are you keeping the building? Because in the world, there's lots of possibilities. And some have suggested, do we really need to keep the building? You don't have to. You can sell it off and you can give the money back to CPA and somebody else can demolish it. But that's not what the town voted for. You could try to sell it to somebody else. Let them deal with all this, but we tried that once. I heard it suggested that another round of RFP should be sent out and see what happens. I guess we would stand in the way of that, but in the meantime, I guess if the town wants to keep the building or keep the project for the possibility of someone else buying it and making it into X, Y, or Z, then you're making a commitment to save the building. You're reaffirming the commitment to save the building. Because I hear, I'm hearing in my own head, some people saying, did we really want to do this? How do we back out? So if the town through our staff and boards is saying, no, we're keeping the building, we just don't know quite how to get started. We do know that getting started means from everything I'm hearing, getting rid of the additions, and I have walked through it now, and it's a mess. So I'm obviously it makes sense if your goal is the original structure and then doing what you will with it or adding on to it, but that the original additions are they're not appropriate and they serve no purpose today. So summing up, I'm wondering why we're not, isn't this an $800,000 to $1 million project that this is phase one of?
Mhm.
And if we're not going to put it in the actual application, if you will, but if I'm going to be standing up front, I want to at least be able to speak to where we're going. That we're committing to save the building, and we know it's going to cost $1 million. But we got to spend this $93,000 first.
I think most of the people here are behind that game plan and always have been, and always knew that there was gonna be. I mean, I was there always with the assumption that, or not even the assumption, discussed that there's going to, the CPC was gonna be a mechanism for funding. And even gone through all the committee, has been reminding us that, you know, sooner or later, this bill is gonna come due. We gotta be prepared for it, you know, we have to have the at least have a plan for that financing component. And I think the real piece that's gonna, and not to pass the buck, but the piece that it's not this group being definitive on it. If you're gonna go up there and say, this is the program, our town leaders have to state definitively, this is the program, so that you can be viable up there and have it, and not have another backlash or sub dialogue that goes along in the nethers behind the focus of what happened to the committee, where the committee had a great plan, it came forward, and then sort of this underground resistance came up that had the political capital that was unbeknownst to the committee or unannounced or undiscussed. So all the steps went through, and then the legs were cut out from underneath it for whatever reason. And I think that's the piece that's missing, because you can't get up there and state that if they're gonna say, yeah, no, that's not what we wanna do, or we don't really know what we wanna do. The people wanna hear a plan, and they don't really. And I would bet at this point in time, half of them would be like, tear it down, build it, whatever, just want to see it move forward. Though I think the majority of people would love to see it as an asset to the town in its form, whether it's a public building that you can then rent at certain people, or it becomes a town hall, whatever the functionality is. But I think people have to be, the people that up on the select board have to make a definitive statement on it. And behind that statement becomes what this is just step one, how to clean it up. But all those steps need to line up, all that planning, all that engineering. If it's towards a specific goal, you're going to get a more efficient use of your money. If this is what we're gonna do, it's going to be a town office at some point in time. Phase 3 is gonna be a town office, phase 2 is gonna be a town office. So if we rip it down or take down the old parts, these are the things that we wanna accomplish towards that end. And anything else besides that, you're just gonna run up, you're gonna put your political capital and this committee up there discussing stuff that it's gonna take away from our ability to present other things years in the future, you know, or other projects that are gonna be also somewhat, I don't even wanna call this controversial. I think it's there, it just has whatever reason, it's seen as a viable something, you know. And I just think that any direction, or you know, there's obviously a preferred direction. The committees here and the people that have done the work on it have a preferred direction. But as long as there is a specific concept, then I think everyone would be aligned behind it. Or the majority of people would be aligned behind it.
So nothing has changed since the White Cliffs Commission did its work.
Right.
There's no business is gonna throw off enough cash to rehabilitate this building. No restaurant, no brewery, no coffee shop, nothing. Right? The only reason the affordable housing thing worked is because it was being financed through tax credits.
Right.
And then ironically, the amount we're being asked to pay for the demo of this portion of the structure was all the Metro West proposal was asking us CPC to contribute for the renovation of the whole thing. That's gone now. Fine. Okay. The other option that was in the commission was town hall. But I'm hearing, but I don't know that a decision has ever been definitively made that it will not be town hall. So, but it seems like that's the direction the winds are going, that it will not be town hall. So if it's not gonna be town hall, and if there's no business that's gonna be able to throw off enough cash to do this, that means it has to come out of our pockets without any vision for it, right? And it was like $9 million then to do it for no purpose, or no revenue. So that's what it's gonna cost. So my own view is I can't vote for spending for this portion now, because there's no plan for it. We don't know. I mean, again, I was criticized on the commission for not moving fast enough 4 years ago, right? For not having done anything with it. So unless there is a plan to either take it on, put it in the budget, and this is what's gonna happen, then I can vote for the money. But unless that happens, I can't. Maybe the way to do it is put a shot clock on it. You got 3 years, come up with a plan. If not, get a special act from the legislature to remove it from CPAC and sell it.
And I think a lot of people have that expectation. I think when we first got it, it was even more so maybe that there's some sort of revenue behind this thing, but I think you've got to look at it like a soccer field or like a town or like a library or something like that. There is no revenue stream that's going to pay for the cost. There may be, if it was a function facility or something like that, there may be a small revenue stream for people holding a shower or whatever they are.
Like paying for electricity.
Yeah, that pays for the thing. But as a beautiful town asset, it just like you wouldn't expect a field to generate revenue. This is the same thing. It is a visible historical asset that would be preserved, and to ask more of it than that is not feasible. We all know that the business went under because it wasn't feasible. And it's also illogical because it's just the same thing as any other, conservation purchase or library renovation. We don't ask the library to renovate, to generate cash out of the reading room, This is not going to generate that kind of cash ever, but it shouldn't be asked to. And I think people have to break that out of there.
Yeah.
They somehow thought that it was like a money maker thing and that we should be getting money from it or whatever. That can't be an expectation. But again, that if it's the town hall or just a town building, a lovely town building where you have CPC meetings in and stuff like that, there's nothing wrong with that asset. But that's gotta be, like you said, it's gotta be a choice to go towards that end. I think everyone in the town, you're gonna have a tough time selling it without that,
A plan.
without that component behind it.
We might be having this debate at the microphone.
Maybe the plant in the audience. Speaking for myself, not but because of the committee. Don't you love that?
I do think that
Oh, no, wait, of the now defunct. The Wastelands Committee.
This just sound great.
I mean, to Andy's point, though, if we get letters of buy-in from the other committees or boards or not, then that might go a little bit further and saying, look, these.
There's only one board that matters right now, right? Am I wrong in that assessment? Is it only,
Sure,
it's the
yeah.
select board that has to make the decision at this point in time?
Yeah, and that's fine. And you can certainly go with the historical district or anything like that, that is less the voting of it, but there's nothing to say that in 3 years, when it actually comes to be in front of the people who are actually voting, that it's gonna be in the same board. So, but I think your point is right, is that, if it is presented, it would have to be something that we could at least say, well, the this board, the select board is in agreement or not with moving forward this way.
Yeah, very realistic that this is step one, preserve it. Step
Yeah.
two is get the design to make it a function hall or make it the town office or make it,
Community
whatever,
center,
yeah,
whatever you want.
whatever
Yeah,
the
multi-use,
thing is, yeah,
multifunction.
a library extension or whatever it needs to be, But it needs, and without that
Direction.
direction, no one's, you're gonna have, everyone is gonna want that.
So have fun with that.
And actually, I might just let the Lake of Fire guy be the one.
Well, for your support.
We'll give you the ideas.
Well, and to your point, it's a cop out to go for the town with a $93,000 proposal. We're thinking about taking the additions down. We just need this a little bit of. And you might get it passed. Minimize the discussion. But I don't feel right about that. And I don't agree with it either. So if I can't agree with the application.
no.
You guys may overrule me 8-1, but you needs to be more behind us than just using CPA. You can't use CPA for maintenance anyway. So we have to be sure that we're doing something that is part of the restoration.
I didn't mean to say that I wasn't behind this proposal. I'm 100% behind this proposal if it has an end attached to it, that's.
I'm telling you, I don't think I'm behind the proposal, unless it has
Yeah.
the end to it. Or at least if not the total cost of what we need to do is at least brought forth, even if it's an estimate. Knowing that if we're not gonna present that big number at this time meeting, we're letting the town know that we're coming back in 2026 with a much bigger number.
I mean, ultimately, this building was not gonna be a viable use building with those additions anyways. So they had to come on one way or another, whether we were paying for it or whether the prospective end user was paying for it. Those additions were a catastrophe. So they have to come off. We can sit on it.
Will this be a public hearing? I don't want to speak on it.
Is this a public hearing?
Yes,
It is, and you are entitled to speak, Norm.
thank you. Norm Corbin, 35 Whitney Street. I'm liking the conversation because it's the issues that have to be brought up. But if you go down the path, when you go down this path, you get the $80,000 for the design work and maybe $800,000 to fucking up the building, but that's not the story. The story is the mansion still has to be rehabbed for probably $8 or more million. And if you're gonna be honest, I don't wanna be the one to say it, but if you're gonna be honest, you have to lay the groundwork that this is step one, step two, and step three, that's the big ticket item. Step two is not the big ticket item. And so that, my recommendation is that if you wanna be honest, you have to show the whole picture.
There's honesty and then there's honesty.
No.
It's like,
But I'm just, that's my 2 cents.
I don't disagree with you, but it's tougher to talk about part 3 issue, but
That 8 million though was 4 or 5 years ago, so we're probably 15 million at this point.
I don't think anyone wants.
More than 8.
Didn't go down.
Yeah, we are.
That's for sure.
Well, okay, so but the 8 million was to take those pieces off and rebuild it anyways, restore it. Or did the 8 million include not taking those pieces off and just restoration?
So that was to get it to the point where it could be, so it was like, it could be occupied, but not for a specific purpose. So it's to make the building functional,
Right,
blank slate,
right,
essentially.
That was the renovation, like,
Right.
more or less.
accessible and,
I don't know that include the ADA and the elevators and.
yeah, that was my question.
It was, if I remember correctly, it was like $6 million at that time.
Lisa Maselli, speaking as a resident. I was there when we voted for it, 2016. And it was quite a lot of emotion with it. I think everybody has a great, there's a lot of history behind this building. It's been there for over 100 years. Many things have come and gone. It's been in the newspapers in the 20s, the speakeasy. It's got history. It's the only building like it is right now in our town that has so much history and so much value with history. When DVBW came before the board and did all of its x-rays and research and everything else, they also called it a very unique asset, as Andy said. It's an asset to the town. So it's a shame that this has gone on for so long and been let so long to have all of these issues go with it. And I really believe that it's something that the people have to understand the value of the asset to begin with. It was my understanding that we didn't pull the restriction, which is required after so many months of the town meeting vote, because we wanted to be sure we could do something with it. And the restriction would prevent us from doing that, if I'm not mistaken, in that statement.
Well, yeah, but the new update we did get from Stuart Saginaw was, doesn't matter, the building does have the restriction on it.
Okay, so
It's a blank sheet of paper, but the restriction is on it now.
there is a restriction on that?
It's by default, the resident restriction is on the building. By default.
Yeah, when he presented to our committee, it means that it's implied, because under the law, if you acquire real property with CPA, land or building, and those are really the only two categories.
That makes sense.
For the most part, you might acquire a building that became affordable housing, same thing, but it's a little different, but land or historic building, you need a restriction is required, which means that that property will always be protected in perpetuity for that use.
Okay.
If it's open space land, it means it's always open space.
Okay.
And in every other case with this committee, it's mostly been land purchases. And in each case, there's been a conservation restriction executed on those lands, written, signed, and someone is holding it, managing it, if you will, to make sure that those parcels are kept that way. With a historic building, it would be similar. So the idea is that we bought it with CPA funds. The historic preservation restriction is implied. And so as Norm says, it's there, if you want to call it the blank sheet of paper. And what it means practically is in the nuclear scenario, you would have to request that to be removed. It has to go through Mass Historical Commission. It's essentially a state action that would allow such, and that would be one step. The other step would be basically the town's got to give the money back to the CPA account. Might come out in the wash if somebody was going to buy the property.
Right. So the next question is then, once these two additions had to be removed in order to get a historic.
My recollection is for both the National Register and for the preservation restrictions, those additions.
Right, so.
The National Register is, for the town, it really has no effect. But for private, if you look at the request we got from Metro West, putting it on the National Register, I think it ended up getting $2 million in tax credit. So that's the driver, for, non-town related projects.
And more specifically to that point, if the additions were removed and that was established, you believe that's a stepping stone to National Register qualification?
Yeah, it should be, and then I haven't read it recently, but the letter from Michael Stein, that's who's in charge of that, it. If you start to show the progress, you can put it on the register, but I don't know if the town continues to own it, I don't know if we have any value in getting on the register. Because we don't have the access to tax credits.
But can't we use that for funds that are available for historic properties?
There might be something there, I don't know.
Thanks.
It's like the Mass Historic Grants, you need to have a listed property.
Yeah, but those are like $100,000,
Yeah, very
$150,000. There may be some other things that I don't know about, that doesn't really help us here.
But it's a starting point, it's part of the conversation as to why, to Andy's point, why do we want to keep this asset? Because that's the bigger question now, after so many years, that there are people who are, well, sell it, burn it, get rid of it, we don't want it. But it was purchased as an asset. So it continues to not just be a historical significant building, but 6 acres of open space land that could be used for flowers or walking areas or what have you. The land and the house are the two things that are together, and that's what our asset is. And at some point in time, it would be an open space, much like what we did with Common, where there's a place where you can go and congregate or do a variety of different things up there that the town could enjoy. And you could create a lot of different things. Yes, you have to put them down in a plan because that was never allowed to really be explained or come, with creativity of what can we do with it? Because it was just a limbotic situation for so many years. And I think it's up to the select board to motivate and do something with this asset, because by not all these years, we have been remiss in our charge. So, we haven't had any discussion really about it. It came in at 11 o'clock at night, that last meeting. 11 o'clock at night, you really can't get into a long discussion. So I'm hoping that there might be a way of it coming in early, and I'm hoping there's not a lot on that agenda that will negate that thought. But if it's something that can be done, which I hope it can, I think that the building itself and all its, and I'm sure that when Kathleen Planowitz was the one who had a dream for it, she dream went to Texas.
Love you, Kathleen.
And here we are.
I
So,
think we still send her hate mail.
No. Pictures of White Cliff.
postcard. So, I mean, I would certainly want to have at least an airing of possibilities. If that means that you have to wait until the 5th of February, then I would ask that you do that, if that's what the board here is interested in. But, as a resident, I know that has had a lot of emotional value to people, historic value to people, and I think that it is something we could be very proud of if we can finally start moving on repairs and even the land could be used right now. So you could put gardens in, you could put walking paths in, doesn't negate that either, just because the building needs to be brought up to codes and such, so.
As I'm sure you're all aware, I'm a proponent of saving the building. But as I expressed at the last meeting, I'm not convinced the town should continue. For financial reasons. I see a path, I wish I could, but I don't see a path for that.
Well, Lisa, I know you're speaking as a citizen. But a week from Monday, you have to go back and be on our select board.
Yes.
Maybe you need to be the driver. Because your board has a decision. If I may say that. And no disrespect, your board handles many important items. You can always put something higher than the white building on the hill that, we don't really have to address this month. But the board effectively took over responsibility after they said essentially it's no longer White Cliffs Committee that's operating.
Correct.
The board might consider revisiting that decision. The board might consider restoring it. The board might consider subcommittee, something to bring direction to your meetings. Because when it comes up, and when it has come up, really in the past year, if it's fair to say, it's essentially been tossed up in the air and then settled back down. There's, it's, you won't have enough time in our lifetimes to get everybody's input. I think as a citizen, I see the select board as providing guidance. And sometimes guidance is not going to make everyone happy. But the board could provide guidance on certain things that could happen. And then could be honest about what it's going to cost.
I agree with you.
Um,
We know as a citizen we understand.
To be clear, in my own personal request, it's the need for some consensus that the effort to move forward with the addition removal, which is moving forward with restoration. The board is behind that because they see value in a bigger plan. On the one hand, it might be if the town is showing an effort to restore the building, at least to make it safe and whole, it would be easier to find another steward who might, by some miracle, take it over, buy it, and willing to keep it as an historic property. Not impossible. Or the town itself moves forward with making it into something. It's certainly a step that you would have to do if you're going to keep the building. So I'm going to be asking the select board to make that as your first decision. Because you're in charge. Do you think we should keep the building? The town voted yes. Doesn't matter if it was 8 years ago. And that's the feedback that I was hoping to get before February, when we typically do make our decisions on what applications we want to bring to the warrant. Because the board and the town administrator are typically looking to make the warrant by that time, in terms of the timeline. And if I can help speak to that, I would welcome the opportunity to be on the agenda.
I will see what I can do and ask the question. I'd like to be before I come to.
My wingman, for sure.
And many of you actually, except you.
But since then,
We don't want to hear. I didn't mean it.
I know what you meant.
We talked this out pretty well. Any more? Give input. I think we would agree. We're going to hopefully get a little more feedback, and when we return to the public hearing in February, it's the 5th, right? Then it's 6th.
I was gonna say the 5th is Wednesday.
We're already here, right? So we can deliberate on it and take it into account with all the other numbers.
When was this, the next select board hearing?
13th,
The 13th?
So 2 meetings in January, 13th and
13th and
27th.
If that February meeting isn't enough time to make a final decision, what is our final date to be able to vote on our choices?
In prior years, the town administrator started getting nervous. So like middle of February, we had to call our meeting. It's not out of the question.
So it'd be in February, not.
It would be the goal.
Okay.
I'm scheduled away at the end of it.
I also think warrant articles need to be before the select board in the month of February for additional reviews. That's usually why these articles, the CPC makes decision on these articles early in February to get them before the select board. Or select board meeting in February.
That's the protocol. Exceptions have been made, including when White Cliffs came before the town the first time. But we'll go with that plan. Any other new business from anyone? Other buildings we'd like to buy?
I really think that.
Huh?
At the last meeting, you asked me to give you some information about funds that need to be approved for extension through, the next fiscal year, Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. The day after that meeting, I sent Lori a memo detailing that, which I think she sent to you guys. I'm not sure if you've acted on that yet, but if not tonight in your February meeting, you need to take a vote on extending those reserve funds through June 30th of 2020.
Very good. Just for the record, you're talking about funds approved at prior town meetings for the Northborough Affordable Housing Corporation. And which traditionally each year we look at what you spent and what you haven't and are asked to renew them, which is fine. And I think what you're saying this time is it may not be necessarily for a Boundary Street project, but obviously there'll be something that's fair to say.
Yeah, there'll definitely be other opportunities in the future, so we just want to keep those funds that were approved for future use rolling forward, and because they had a 2-year limit on them each year, you guys make a decision about extending them forward. So I did detail the amounts that need to be extended. That doesn't usually go before town meeting, but you need to vote as a committee on that before you adjourn for the
Very good. We'll definitely put it on the agenda for February.
Okay, thanks.
But while I have you, what we're talking about, and you and Andy, the Affordable Housing Reserve that we have, these are funds again voted by town meetings. Within the Affordable Housing Reserve must be used for that purpose. $279,863. In my own mind, I assumed we would make that a component of the Village Drive project. Part of the funds to take it. Is there any,
Why it's something
or any argument why that wouldn't be again?
The 279, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. I thought it was obvious, but I didn't want to. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Any other talking points? We know when our next meeting is, even though the agenda's got it wrong as well. February 6th. I think that'd probably be me. And hearing no other input. Understand motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Forget about you, Leslie, sorry.
Oh, you're happy. You should be happy I spared you guys my crappy cold.